Folks, thank you for your patience. Let's kick off. First of all, a few housekeeping items. Gents' toilets out that door, ladies' toilets out this door. 2 fire escapes, I feel like an air steward. Fire escapes out both doors and the corners as well. Thanks very much for coming tonight. My name's Calum Kerr. I'm the chair of Yes Scottish Borders as well as Yes Tweeddale. This event came about tonight because of local people asking us if we were going to do anything in the area. So we had a discussion about what we could do, how we would give people an opportunity to hear perspectives on the referendum, to ask questions, to get the information that you are seeking as you try to decide what is the biggest decision you will ever make in terms of a vote in your lifetime. It is the biggest ever in this country. People say for 300 years, but they forget that 300 years ago nobody got the vote. This is the biggest ever. So we all know it's an important decision. We all know we want to make it with the right information. And whether you go yes or no, you want to be sure that you've done it for the right reason. So tonight we have a varied panel for you that are going to offer you some different perspectives that come from different points on the political spectrum. We're going to have, first of all, Allan, then we'll have Robin, and then Christy. And each will give you a speech and give you their view on the independence referendum and what it could mean for Scotland. After that, we will do a question and answer session. Now, you can either write down your question, but you don't have to if you'd like to ask it. We will be passing around the mic. We're just conscious that not everybody wants to necessarily speak in front of a crowd of people, so we want to give you both options, either written or verbal. If you are going to do a written question, can I ask you to keep it reasonably concise, just so that everybody gets a fair crack of the whip and everyone gets to ask the questions they want answered tonight. So first up tonight is going to be Allan Grogan. Now, Allan is the convener and the national spokesman for the Labour for Independence organisation. He's a graduate in politics and international relations from Dundee Uni, a Labour Party member from the age of 19. Now, Labour for Independence believe that a yes vote will give the people of Scotland the best chance to have a socially just, fair and more equal society. They also believe that it will lead to the restoration of a real Scottish Labour Party, that with independence it can return to its founding principles, and in doing so, return it once again to being the party of the people of Scotland. Allan.
Good evening and thank you very much, Chair, and thanks for everyone for coming tonight. It's a pleasure to come down here. I apologise we're a little bit late. Robin was stopping to get crisps, so clearly you never got enough. I've been told that I can speak for about 20 minutes tonight, but I'm actually, if you'd allow me, just going to be a little bit more brief than that to give you the opportunity to ask a few more questions, because I think that's what's really important. This vote in September, for me and for many people in this country, is not what the media tells you, it's not what the No campaign tells you. It's not about Alex Salmond, it's not about the SNP, and it's not about nationalism. Now, there are some who are voting yes who are nationalists and who feel that way, and I perfectly respect that. But for me and for many of my colleagues, it's about different reasons. And I think Robin's here is an example of the vast array of different ideas and beliefs of what independence can bring for Scotland. For me, it's about two things. It's about democracy, and it's about the kind of society we live in today and the kind of society we can have in this country. First of all, democratically. I want to make this point because I think it's really, really important. In the last general election, the party that we voted for fourth and the party that we voted for third are the government that is leading Westminster. They are the government in Westminster. That means that they have their say in Scotland on tax, on social security, on the economy, international relations, foreign aid and defence. Third and fourth. Scotland's a very rich country and has a lot of resources, including oil. I wonder if Scotland had been in the Middle East, and with so much oil as we have, and maybe if they were run by the fourth voted party and the third voted party in our country, then we might be facing, at worst, sanctions, at best sanctions, and at worst, invasion from America and the United Kingdom fighting for our democracy. But it doesn't happen here because Scotland not getting their say, Scotland not being allowed to have the governments in Westminster that they vote for, is not important because it fits into the American and United Kingdom bubble. The second reason I want to mention is the society. And the society we can have. But before we look at the society we can have, we have to look at the society we live in today. The Sunday Times, a couple of weeks ago, released their rich list, as they do every year. And they found out that rich people are getting richer. I don't think that was any surprise. They found out that there are now over 100 billionaires in the United Kingdom. So why is it then that a couple of months ago we were moved up from the fourth most unequal society to the third most unequal society in the Western world? Bankers are being paid exorbitant amounts of bonuses after providing nothing but losses. Yet 1 in 4 Scottish children are living in poverty, with another 100,000 likely to go into that poverty region in the next 5 years. MPs were recently given an 11.5% pay rise. Good for them. Unfortunately, for the rest of us, that is not reflected in either the public or private services. As Ed Miliband is very keen to say, the cost of living is rising, and yet pay is staying the same. Food banks are prevalent all over this country. The Red Cross had to ship in food parcels to Scotland in peacetime. This is from a country that would be, if it was independent, the 14th richest country in the world, and that is a disgrace. Parents are having to go without food to feed their kids. Pensioners are having to decide whether to heat their meals or whether to put the heating on. This is the reality we are living in Scotland today. And if it's not happening to you, it's probably happening to a member of your family or a member of your friends circle, because it is happening all over Scotland. But don't worry, because we still have enough money to fund another £100 billion to replace an outdated nuclear arsenal that has no place in a civilised modern society. There is a decline in Scotland and the UK. And it's not just a recent thing, it's not since Cameron came along, it's happened ever since Thatcher came in and took the heart out of our communities. They took the jobs and they took the soul out of the places that we live in. Independence is the most important reason for me, is that it gives us an opportunity for change. An opportunity to make a real difference. Now, it's not going to be easy. It's not going to be a panacea. It's not going to be a paradise from day one. We're not going to win the World Cup. We're not going to get 40-degree weather. But what we do have is the opportunity to have a government that looks after its people and recognise the needs, wants and aspirations of these people, because they are these people. Now, some of my Labour colleagues will argue that if we vote yes, we are abandoning our friends and our brothers and sisters in Northern England to a lifetime of the Tories. Well, first of all, let me just address that. It's not true. I think only once in the last 50 years has the Scottish vote changed what the Westminster vote would actually be. But my solidarity to my friends and brothers and sisters in Northern England doesn't end because we're independent. It doesn't end at Dover right now to my friends and brothers and sisters in other countries around the world. So why should it end at the borders of Scotland when we become independent? They are going to argue that we are fighting and campaigning for a British road to social justice. But never in our lifetime, certainly my lifetime, has that been so far away from being possible. So far away from that society that we all crave to be achieved. They say that if you get we don't need independence, all we need is a Labour government in 2015 to put things right, to fix the Tory mess. Well, what kind of Labour government are we going to have? We're going to have a Minister of Work and Pensions who says that she'll cut harder and faster than the Tories did on social security. We'll have a Defence Minister who's pledged his support to maintaining Trident in Scotland. We'll have a Prime Minister, Ed Miliband, who says makes no sense for the Labour Party not to be the party of the middle class. And worst and most scarily of all, we will have a Chancellor who is going to stick by the coalition government's austerity cuts. But we've only seen 10 pence. We've still to see 90 pence, and every pound of these cuts are still to be hit, and still to be hit in every community and town and city, not just in Scotland, but in the whole of the UK. Because that's the reality of the situation in Westminster. Labour are chasing the tail of the Tories, who are chasing the tail of UKIP into a never-ending spiral of darkness. We're moving further and further away from what people in Scotland actually care about, what they actually want to see happening in their country. Independence gives us that opportunity. It gives us the opportunity for people like myself, who's been a lifelong supporter and a member for X amount of years of the Labour Party. I don't want to reveal my age. I'm younger than I look, I'll just say that.
So am I.
We can have a restoration of a real Scottish Labour Party, back to its founding principles and beliefs, a return of Clause 4, but with a modern outlook, an innovative outlook to regenerate and rejuvenate Scotland, to create a living wage for all people, not just the £7 odd Westminster are saying, but an actual living wage of £10 an hour, so that people who work will never have to rely on social security to top up their earnings. We want a Labour Party that will deal and tackle with corporations that don't pay their taxes, that employ people on minimum wage at 0-hour contracts. Instead, what we've got right now is the Labour Party putting caps on social security. We know who the people at fault for the economic crisis are, and it certainly isn't those people who are claiming benefits. We want to see real equality in pay and standards, a fair and equal society for everyone, no matter of your gender, race or creed. To regenerate energy and transport, and to regenerate and renationalise the Royal Mail. To remove Trident, to become the party of the people of Scotland once again. These are tough choices. These are tough decisions that we'll have to make as a country. But I feel more secure and more safe knowing that it's going to be the people of Scotland and the people who are elected by the people of Scotland that are going to decide, not 12 posh boys from the Burlington Club. Things are going to be tough, and these decisions will be tough that we have to make. But we have a real opportunity for change, a real chance in Scotland, a real chance in the Labour Party, a real chance to have the society that we want. Thank you.
Thank you, Allan. Our next speaker is Robin McAlpine. Robin is the director of the Jimmy Reid Foundation and the editor of the Scottish Left Review. For those of you that haven't heard, Jimmy Reid Foundation was established, as the name suggests, in memory of Jimmy Reid, to continue the legacy of a radical political thinking his life represented. And to me, it's an example of the kind of exciting and innovative new thinking that is emerging as part of this referendum debate. Scotland hasn't stood still. Scotland is energised like never before. And across the political spectrum, there are groups coming with new ideas of how we can do things in a better way. Robin.
Firstly, thank you to the organisers. Languages make such a difference. I follow to these meetings 3, 4, 5 nights a week, and it's a hunt for a chippy. I ought to be about 20 stone by now. If it wasn't for all that stress, I'll tell you, I'd be in trouble. And lovely to be in Walkerburn. Many fond memories of Walkerburn. I'm from Bigger, so we used to come over here playing rugby quite often. And in fact, my first win as a non-school boy, first ever game that we won as a non-school boy was in Walkerburn. So lots of pleasant memories, but they do get a bit vague towards the end. So lovely to be here and probably make it home and remember what happened. Is this as good as it gets? That's all I really want to ask. Is this as good as it gets? And if it's not, how can it be better? Can we do it? Have we got what it takes? Have we the ability to be better? That's all I want to talk about tonight. Because one of the things in this campaign which has come up over and over again is this idea that it's all about hope versus fear. That we're offering hope and that they're just trying to scare people out of it with fear. Actually, it's almost worse than that. It's not about hope and fear. It's about confidence and not confidence. Because confident people can do amazing things. When people are confident, when people believe that they are capable of doing things, they can do amazing things. And when people's confidence is down, when it's low, when people don't believe in themselves, they crawl into a corner and let things be done to them. It's about confidence. Can we be confident in Scotland? Well, I'll tell you what we can't be confident with is Westminster rule. Let's just have a quick look at where we actually are. If you are working in the second lowest paid economy in the developed world. If you have the third longest hours in Europe and the lowest number of holidays in Europe. If you are a pensioner, you have the lowest state pension in Europe and you're the third most likely of 28 European countries, you're the third most likely to live in poverty. If you're a woman, you are the you live in the country with the 8th biggest gap between male and female earnings, and you're living in the country with the highest childcare costs in Europe. If you are disabled, you have the lowest level of benefits in Europe. And you have the highest likelihood of every country in Europe, the highest likelihood of living in poverty. You stop and think about that for a second. If you're disabled, you'd be better to be in Bulgaria. You'd be better to be in Lithuania. These are better places to be disabled than Britain. If you're a worker, you live in a country with the 27th worst track record of industrial democracy, of giving workers a say in their work. Only Lithuania is worse. We have the third highest housing costs. We have the highest rail costs. We have a productivity record in industry, which is 16 percentage points behind the average of an advanced economy. Of all the developed economies in the world, of which there's over 40, only 2 have seen a reduction in industrial output. That's making, building, creating, doing, exporting and selling things. Only 2 have seen a reduction in that in the last 35 years. One is France, that fell by about 4%. The other is Britain, that fell by 35%. Every single other developed economy has seen an increase in their industrial production, and those range from about 18% to 100% increase. So if anyone tells you that you can't manufacture, you can't make things in an advanced economy, developed economy, well, everyone else can. It's just us that can. This is the reality of where we are. We are in the 4th most unequal country in the developed world. This is not an accident. This is all a result of one model of politics. It's a model of politics which we call me first politics. It was a philosophy that Westminster introduced when Thatcher arrived, and it assumes that if you can create a war of all against all, if everybody fights each other, and then we just wait around, find out who won and give them everything. If we do that, eventually, through some crazy process of Darwinian selection, we will have the best possible society. Of course, it's madness, because if you create a war of all against all, first of all, most people lose. That's the reality. That's why we have this problem. And second of all, those that win, once they start winning, you can't stop them anymore. That's what's happened in our economy. So if you think about what's happened in our economy, we have said whoever is the biggest and most able to defeat the other businesses in their sector, we just keep backing them. And we keep backing them and backing them and backing them, and eventually we'll reach utopia. All that means is if you live in a town like this, and somebody decides they want to turn up, buy a field, put a shed in it, buy cheap stuff from China, sell it to you expensively, and close down your high street, close down your local economy, that's supposed to be good for you. If it means that someone has bought all the available land for housing, and they use the ownership of all of that land to push housing prices higher and higher, the cost of that comes out of your pocket, because in the end it's people who are trying to get in the housing ladder who want to move. They're who are paying it. Property developers make the money. 7 out of the 10 richest people in Britain are property developers. Skill-free job. Buy a house, sell it. Buy 2, sell them. Buy 5, sell them, and wait. That's all the property development is. We know how the banks have behaved. The banks have made their money by closing down. I find this amazing. I can't believe there's nobody in jail. Banks were caught deliberately bankrupting small and medium-sized businesses who were their customers so that they could take the assets from those businesses at a knockdown price and sell them on. They were caught doing that. That's the nature of our banking sector. It made its money from us. Advertising, marketing, again, and the outsourcing of public services, again and again, corporations have been operating in what we can only really call a cartel model. So you can choose between one of 4 supermarkets, one of 4 telecoms providers, one of 6 volume house builders, banks, one of 4 or 5 major banks. Again and again, whatever sector you get into, we've ended up in monopoly and cartel. Now, why does this matter? It's very important. This matters because when you do this, this is wealth extracting. Remember that retail and banking and property, they don't create wealth, they just juggle it about the economy. So their job is to say, can we take your money or is it the local shop? Is it the local house builder or your chance to build your own house, or is it us that takes the money? They don't create additional value, they just absorb it. Now, if they can absorb more and more of this value, then they get richer and richer and we get poorer and poorer. That's where the inequality came from. That's why we ended up where we are now. And it doesn't work. Because if you look at what happens, it creates a hollowed out economy. Because when you follow this model, the key thing that you've got to do is what's called profit maximise. Now, everyone thinks profit maximising is always good. No, it's not in the British model. Because what it means is take out as much as you can while putting in as little as you can in the shortest space of time possible. That's the British economic model. Now, that means that what they want you to do is low skill, low pay work in high volume industries. Turn up, get paid very little, do something routine over and over again in a sector in which the owners can then take all their profits from the pockets of their customers. No work, nothing that involves skill, nothing that's creative. And if we reverse that, if we can change that, it can be completely different. Because if you look at why we're the second lowest paid economy, it's because we don't create value in this economy. We don't make things, we don't do things. Our high value service sector is nothing like big enough. We rely on retail and low paid jobs and cleaning and a whole bunch of things which aren't productive. Now, should we be bothered? Oh yes, we should be very bothered. Let me ask a sort of rhetorical question. What would you say is a reasonable wage? A kind of decent salary that you say that someone can live comfortably on? You know, pay the bills, get to the end of the month, fine, and participate in the economy. You know, you're not going to have a tax law, you're not going to be blowing your money on foreign sports cars, but you're not relying on benefits, you're not relying on tax credits. You can live a decent life. 25,000 to 35,000 pounds. Of everybody in full-time work in Scotland today, only 1 in 5 earns between 25,000 and 35,000 pounds. 3 out of 5 earn less than £25,000, half earn less than £21,000, and if you get to the end of this year and you've earned £14,000, you're still better off than a third of our working population. We have a chronic low-pay economy. Now, what happens if it doesn't look like that? What happens if it isn't like that? Well, we did a paper on our website, reidfoundation.org, and what we did with this is we simply took the Scottish tax model, we ran it again. We didn't change the size of the economy, so we kept the economy notionally the same size, no change there. We didn't change any of the tax rates, we kept them absolutely as they were. All we did was we spread wages across the economy like they have the spread in a Nordic economy. So, not all the big chunk of terrible low-paid jobs from about the middle downwards, not the extremely high-paid jobs at the top, and a higher employment rate. They've got many more people in work in these countries. If you do that, and you do nothing else, and you run the tax model again, it will generate £4 billion of additional income. 4 billion. And that's not including all the money you would then be saving by not having to pay tax credits and benefits. £4 billion. It's probably worth 6, 7, 8 billion. People often say, where does the money come from for the good society? That's where the money comes from a good society. We do not have a problem in this country of not enough tax. We do not have a problem in this country of too much public services. We have a problem in this country with not enough of our national wealth in the pockets of our working people. That's the fundamental problem which creates everything else that comes from there. If we had that £8 billion, 6, 7, £8 billion, we wouldn't be talking about deficit. It would not be a problem. We could fund all the public services we wanted without difficulty. We have a chronic low-pay economy. So, can we fix it? Yeah, we can fix it. We can fix it remarkably fast if we're willing to try. Let me give a couple of examples. What we need to do is have an industrial policy. An industrial policy says, up until now, for the last 40 years, we've been told that us as citizens are going to sit in the corner and accept whatever corporations want because the economy is their sphere. No, the economy is part of society. We live in a democratic society, so if we want to have a different economy, we have a democratic right to try. What we have to do is say that our industries which create wealth, local economies, are incredibly important. If we lose more local economies, more centralisation, you lose wealth from local communities and people get poorer and poorer. Local economies matter. Manufacturing matters. Making things matter. Retail doesn't matter. The more retail we have, the poorer we get. We have to wake up. All their profits come from our pockets. All of their profits come from our pockets. And they export them out of the economy. Retail, the more retail you have, eventually the more gets extracted out of your economy. Which is why Glasgow is the second shopping centre in the whole of Britain, and it's the city with the highest levels of poverty. We've got to be, you cannot regenerate yourself by just letting multinational corporations come in and take your money. So we've got to work on local economies. We've got to do a whole series of things which enable local economies to grow. Because local retail doesn't create value either, but it keeps the money in the economy. Your local shopkeeper gets that money, and they go for a local plumber and a local electrician when they need to, and they shop in their local economy. We've got to have local economies. We've got to have a national programme for creating industries that create good work. Now, there's no time to talk about this just now, but I'll give you a couple of quick examples. If we use an industrial policy, we can create a lot of very good jobs quickly. Britain is the only country in Europe which does not own its national grid. Our national grid is owned by 2 private companies. We've got no say over our national grid. If we were independent, we could take our national grid back. At the moment, the way we would develop our energy is we let private corporations buy cheap Chinese technology and put it on the land of millionaire landowners. They then capture all of our natural resources, our wind, and export all that to their shareholders. We get 20% tax on the profits that they make. If we owned our own grid, we could straightforwardly say, no, it's our energy, it's our nation, we will build those technologies here. We will build the technologies which will create the next generation of renewables here, the next generation of energy storage here. It won't cost any more. We have to do this anyway. We have to replace almost all of our energy generation over the next 20 years. So this is a straightforward question. Do we want the power to develop that next generation of energy in a way that makes us rich? Or do we want to have the lack of power which ensures that that next generation of energy will be developed in a way which makes corporations rich? Housing. We have a major problem in this country with housing. When 30 years ago, for every £100 that was the public spent on housing, £90 went on bricks and mortar and £10 went on housing benefit. Today, for every £100 that the public spends on housing benefit, £95 goes on benefit, on housing benefit, and £5 goes on bricks and mortar. It's why we have a dreadful stock of high quality rental housing which pushes prices up, bullies people into having to get mortgages that they can't afford or that they don't need. And if you look at what it's like in other countries, in Germany, young professionals don't want to own a house. It's a millstone around their neck. They can have such high quality, reasonably priced public sector or private sector rental houses that they say, nah, why tie yourself down with a house? I can get a good quality house anytime I want with as long a tenure as I want, and I can do whatever I want to it. Why would I want a mortgage? We need to create a new generation of house building. We can do this straightforwardly. Austerity is an anti-investment ideology. We can borrow sensibly in a national company against future rents. Because one of the things they never talk about in housing is it generates rents. We can build an entire new generation of housing In that borrowing, in that national company which will control house prices, create high quality housing, and above all will create lots and lots of high quality jobs immediately. Now, these are just two examples of ways in which we can use industrial policy to create tens and tens of thousands of jobs, which are high-paid, high-skilled jobs in this economy, if we are willing to take the powers to do it. We don't have the powers to do it. We have no borrowing powers. We have no control over the grid. We have no powers over competition policy. We have no macroeconomic policy powers of any description whatsoever. We are limited in what we can do. If people tell you, oh, you could just do it just now, you can't. You can. Now, I'll stop there because I really do want to, it's the questions, I want to answer questions. Just to say that this project started in the Jimmy Reid Foundation about a bit over a year and a half ago. We were going to produce 6 papers just to see what could you do with independence, and we announced it. And this country is so alive just now. This country is buzzing just now. There are so many people in this country just now who want to say, don't let this campaign finish without having a chance to show what we could really do. And we started getting knocked down in offers. People were phoning us up, do you want a paper on this, do you want a report on that? We are now over 50 papers on this project. Now, these papers cover everything. They cover from housing through to how children can have a democratic say, all the way through to investment strategies, economic policy, education, everything, the full law. And these policy papers do show in a confident way how we can transform this country. Nothing in those 50 policy papers, nothing that we propose, hasn't been tried somewhere else and been shown to work. Because that's what we did. We looked around the world and we said, who's done it better than us? And what can we learn from them? So these 50 papers are there. Who can read 50 papers? I mean, dear God, I've got to, they pay me, but that's why my beard's grey. Who can read 50 papers? So what we did was we decided people need to understand and feel confident that there is a way we can change. There's a real chance to change. So what we did was we took those 50 papers, we set ourselves some very tight rules, we wrote them up in a short, easily readable book, no jargon, no bullet points, no references, no footnotes, no charts, no graphs, no italics, nothing complicated. Just a simple story about how we transform things in a way that people can understand. And I just got it back from printers today. So I've got one box here, if anyone wants, we're selling it, we'd love to give them away, we haven't got any money, so we're selling them for £5. I've got a box and people can give me a shout when we get back to the end. Well, what we're saying is, we have had one economic model, a me-first economic model. It told us we were all going to win. We didn't. We've had 35 years of me-first politics, and we all came second. It's not good enough. We need to admit where we are. We need to admit what we can be. The best quote of this entire referendum campaign so far was one old guy who was interviewed by a TV programme the other night, and they were saying to him, if Scotland was a car, what kind of car would it be? And he gave an answer. I'm a political strategist, and you could put 30 political strategists in a room and they would never come up with a phrase as good as this if you gave them an hour. And they said to him, Scotland was a car, what kind of car would it be? In a blink of an eye, he said, a half-finished Lamborghini. My God, seriously, if I could buy that ability, I'd hire him. A half-finished Lamborghini, as good as it can be, and we've no built it yet. That's Scotland. We have everything we need in this country. We have the resource, we have the people, we have the knowledge, we have the willpower. We have everything that we need to build this economy. 35 years of me-first politics and we all came second. We need a politics that puts all of us first. We'll never get it from Westminster. We need to take that power back if we want to change anything. Thank you.
Fantastic. A half-finished Lamborghini, I like it. Okay. We should have had that as a question actually, just to see what came back. Our third speaker is, it's important to have gender balance, so apologies that there's only one lady, but what a lady. I think Christine is known to most of you. She is our local MSP, constituency, having previously been a list MSP. She actually first was elected in 1999 and is currently the convener of the Scottish Parliament's Justice Committee, also the Justice Subcommittee on Policing, and I'm not surprised at this one, Christine, you chair the cross-party group on animal welfare. Christine Weal.
Thank you very much, and it's great to see so many people, whatever your views are, whether you're for or against or undecided, you're here, and I'm glad to see public meetings are being regenerated to show that people are interested in politics again. Now, my journey to independence is strange, but then so many things I do are, but that's for my biography. 43 years ago, it was the first time I voted for independence. 43 years ago, I know, I was very young. And I did it as a tactical vote. I was actually a Labour voter at the time. And I found that I had no option, so I voted for the Scottish National Party for independence. And then I began, and it was very hard to do that, because when you've held a view all your days, to change, you feel treacherous. And I can understand if there's anybody in here who feels they're betraying previous party loyalties or even previous loyalties to United Kingdom by considering voting yes. I understand that. It's very hard to do, because I did it myself. And for a while I thought, I wonder if I've done the right thing. Now, I've never regretted it. Because even all those years ago, I found social justice at the heart of what that party wanted, at the heart of it. But first, independence. Now, the point about this is that independence is not something airy-fairy. Independence is the means to an end for a just and equal society, as both of these gentlemen have said. That's what it's about. It's about democracy, it's about social justice. Now, I have to go back to 1979, because then we were being told, firstly, before the oil, you're too poor to be independent. Then when the oil was discovered, we were too rich and too greedy to be independent. And on the eve of that poll, Lord Hume came on the television, and I'd been out campaigning in the snow for a Scottish Assembly then, and said, vote no, and we will give you something better. And we got nothing. And we've got nothing for decades. Now, the same thing's happening again. The Better Together No campaign, their project is called by them Project Fear. So they've tried You're Too Poor, although we're getting that again. We've not had You're Too Rich and Greedy, but now it's fear tactics that's being used against everything that is said. And when one fear tactic fails, another one comes out. Your mobile phones will be extra cost. That fell by the wayside. Other things are falling by the wayside. So, what were people weren't going to get their pensions paid until Steve Webb, the pensions minister, said, you will get your pension paid. It's an entitlement, not a benefit. It's a contract. You will get it paid. So, all these things have fallen by the wayside, but they can stick to people and stick to their mind. So here we are again with the vote no, and we'll give you something better. Now, you can make a fool of me once, but you're not going to do it again. And why is there no other question on the ballot paper? Why is there no question about Devo Max, Devo Extra, Devo Plus? Because Westminster wouldn't have it on the ballot paper. It was Westminster that decided it will be a yes or a no. And I think that was done then because they thought this will be a scoosh. Scotland won't have the nerve or the confidence or the ambition to even consider voting yes. And now that it's getting a bit squeaky for them, a bit difficult, out of all of this comes these jam tomorrow. Jam tomorrow. I don't even know what kind of flavour of jam they're promising. What's Conservatives promising? What are Labour promising? As for the Liberal Democrats, they can't deliver anything because they'll have to be in coalition. And we know when they go into coalition, principles go by the wayside. The thing about independence is you know what you're getting. You're getting the right to exercise your power at the ballot box at a general election. To say to yourself, who I vote for matters. Scotland will get what it decides to vote for. And you know, I even said, somebody said to me, Christine, if Scotland's independent and a general election, the Conservatives get into power, what will you do? I says, I'll accept it. Because democracy is not conditional. Democracy is exactly what it says. You give people the vote and you give them the right to vote for whichever party they want. So that's the important thing about it. Now, the other thing to say is that we've learned over the last 15 years. I've been in the Scottish Parliament 15 years. We've done good things. And I say we. I don't mean the Scottish National Party. I mean the Parliament, collectively. The Parliament introduced free personal care. So if you're at home and you're elderly and you need help with dressing or to tie your shoelaces, to open that tin of baked beans, you don't pay for it. That doesn't happen south of the border. We have free prescriptions. Why do we have them? Because if you're taking a pink pill in hospital and it's free, why should you have to pay, like England, £8.50 for that pink pill because you're taking it at home? And in fact, what people were doing in Scotland was, if they had to pay for them, they were deciding which ones to get. If they had 3 or 4 in the prescription, they were actually saying to the doctor, what one can I do without? That's disgraceful. Healthcare should be free at the point of being paid for by our taxes. Our children do not pay tuition fees. It's £9,000 a year a whack if you want to be at university or college in England. I've been at university. I came from a working class background. I came from a council house scheme with 5 children. What we did then was I got free education. I went to university on ability, not on ability to pay. Scotland delivered that. Now, what the problem for us in that Parliament is we have a block grant. So when we get something coming in our direction, a whammy like the bedroom tax, where you've got people in the borders, say living in Walkerburn or Innerleithen or Peebles or Hoyk, with 2 bedrooms using one, they're expected to move. Where are they going to move to? Who can move from Peebles to Hoyk? It's not possible. But it was a solution to a London problem. I say a London problem. So what did the Scottish Government do? They've got a fund together to help people pay, to alleviate the bedroom tax so they can stay where they are. So we get bad things thrown at us, which means what we've got to use first aid almost for the damage being done by Westminster. When we introduced free personal care, we have saved 40 million a year to Westminster in paying attendance allowance. So they kept that money. So when we do things that save them from paying benefits, we don't get to keep it to put it somewhere else. It stays. So it's unequal. It is not equal. And already you've mentioned things that we can't do anything about. Iraq war. The Scottish people, in the majority, did not want to go to war in Iraq, but we were taken there. There's a majority of the Scottish people don't want Trident costing trillions or Son of Trident turning up on the Clyde, but it's there, and it's American fingers that will press the button. We can't do anything about it. We're not at the EU. We don't sit at the EU negotiating. Richard Lochhead's outside the door. He's not allowed in because Scotland isn't an independent nation. We're not at United Nations. Luxembourg's there, tiny wee Luxembourg. By the way, it can vote about Scottish fishing. There's not even got any seas. And Scotland can't do any, so we are powerless where it matters. We're powerless over tax. We're powerless over benefits. We're powerless over wars. We're powerless over weapons. These are the big issues. And I have to say, we are quite capable in the Scottish Parliament of dealing with these matters now. Or if you don't think we are, you can vote in better people when we are independent. Now, I want to tell you 2 stories of 2 groups of young people I've met this week. Just so happened to be like this. A group of Norwegian pupils came in to Parliament. It's this long story about getting involved with Norway, but it's to do with one of my sisters. But there we are, I'll tell you about that later. But anyway, here's these Norwegian students coming in. And they're all sitting around the table, and they were asking about Scottish independence. And I knew quite a lot about Norway. Because, of course, Norway discovered oil and gas at the same time as the UK discovered oil and gas. But what did Norway do with its money? It's like winning the lottery. I'm not spending it all this week, blowing it all on a Lamborghini, completed. I'm not doing that. Norway set up its oil fund, worth now trillions. The interest on the money in the oil fund is almost as much as they're drawing out of the North Sea. They are so wealthy, they are a major investor across Western Europe, which brings more money into the Norwegian economy. When their banks got into trouble, Norway could deal with it because it had this big rainy day fund. It also owns 76% of Statoil, the company that draws the oil out. What's the position in the UK? Is there an oil fund? Zilch. Not a penny in it. Who owns the oil companies? America, Japan, you name it, not us. Who owns our energy companies? French people own the energy companies. We have not just sold off the family silver, we've sold off all the white goods, the furniture, the lot. And I'll tell you, I found on the internet, and I'm not very good in the internet, but I found this. There is a rolling thing like a clock, and it shows you how the national UK debt is increasing by the day. We are living on tick. What you said is absolutely right. Retail is concealing the fact that the recession is deeper and deeper, and you have to know that the alternative for not having independence is great big cuts coming down the road. If there's a general election, we don't have independence, you will get them. You just look at this clock, you will find out they're all keeping quiet about it because they don't want us to know what lies ahead. Back to my Norwegian pupils. So I was surprised them when I said what I knew about Norway and about the oil fund. And I saw these confident young people taking for granted, this was the thing, they just took it for granted that their country was socially just. They took it for granted they had an oil fund. So today, what do I have in? I have in some youngsters from Borders College, pretty deprived youngsters that came in, great kids. Every year they come in. These kids were struggling to find an apprenticeship, to even get to an interview. I said, what do you want? I just want a job. And having been with these Norwegian students and seen the vibrancy and how it was just ordinary for them to have this lifestyle and this future before them, and to see these other young people who were despairing of what lay ahead for them in current circumstances, was deeply saddening. Because you see, this vote isn't like any other vote. My God, it's not. Imagine having the democratic right to cast a vote for or against your country's independence. Not a bullet, not threats, not tanks on the street, just a ballot box and leave yourself in there with a cross in front of you. And you're right, it's about confidence. It's about confidence in yourself, your neighbour, the future for your children and your grandchildren, against the background that in our heads we know we can do. We've got the resources. Don't believe we haven't. We've got the resources. We've got the talent. We've got the people. What we lack sometimes is just that bit of self-belief. And I've held on to that through thick and thin for 43 years. And I'm no one let down. And can I say to Molly, here Molly, pay attention. When I convert this woman,
I've tried.
we've won.
Thank you very much, Christy. Can I ask Jim and Norman to go to either side of the room? If people have got written questions, do you want to pass them forward? Jim, are you okay to do that? Norman, are you okay to fix them up this side? And then, if people want to ask a question verbally rather than written, Dave, if you look, there's a microphone, so we'd ask you to hold your hand up in a minute. A couple of things just to say while we do that, folks. If you do not get your question asked, and you still want more information, there is a form over here on the table. Scott will make sure that it's clear where it is. There's several. If you want to give us your name, either an address or email address or phone number, and just put a note of what area you feel either wasn't covered in sufficient detail, or just that you would still like someone to either send you information or even have a discussion with you, let us know. If there are topics that you would like to see covered at future events, we also want to know what they are. A couple of dates to flag to you now, not in Walkerburn, but there is one coming up in Peebles, one coming up in West Linton, which also gives you a view of the type of other events we are organising. So in West Linton on the 23rd of June, we have Business for Scotland speaking, presenting the business case for independence. We have Women for Independence giving a female perspective about some of the issues they see as most important. And then on the 27th of June in Peebles, we have Wealthy Nation. Wealthy Nation are the only right of centre pro-independence group, at least visible at the moment, right? They are made up of people who I would, like Molly, say that they were Conservative voters. Is that fair, Molly? Including the head of Taxpayers Scotland, former economist for Standard Life, and a couple of Conservative lifelong party members. So the independence debate is full of the whole political spectrum. And that's on the 27th of June. We will publicise it more in the McFarlane Hall. First of all, though, I'm going to open it to the floor and see if someone would like to put their hand up and ask a question. Gentleman at the front, can you just hold on for a microphone?
If we want a stronger economy, I agree with what you're saying about apprenticeships. There has been a dearth in that since I was a youngster. There was many apprenticeships going about. We've seen a flood of low-cost immigrants to the country. I've not heard anything about immigration from any of the panellists so far. I'm not against it, per se. I think there is a place for it along the Australian model, where there is a need for a particular skill, we should bring it in. But to bring in low-cost, unskilled workers at the disadvantage of our youngsters, I think is wrong. What do the panel think about this?
Is that your question, by the way?
Yes, it was.
All right, okay.
Well, can I just say, the net migration to Scotland was 22,000 a year. Many of these, and most of them, in fact, are English coming up to Scotland, which is fine. That's how I got here. I came from England. So 22,000. And what the First Minister said, in order to stimulate the economy with the demographic differences between the elderly and the young, we just need an extra 2,000 per year. So the figures that were put into the paper, I think that you're referring to when the First Minister said we need net migration of 24,000, yeah, but it's currently 22. So it's tweaks, it's nothing much. I have to say that Farage has a lot to answer for. We have many Polish people working in the park. They're great, they're young, they're energetic, they're delightfully polite and hard-working. So my view of it is that the many that we have now are very welcome. I also find it very strange that Scottish people migrated all over the world, that they should have this attitude to people who want to work here. The issue of low pay is disgraceful. That's a separate thing. And of course, we want to have a living wage in Scotland. But you know, I remember when my neighbours on either side migrated to, they went to, I think it was New Zealand, Australia and Canada, they were tradesmen. They went for a better economic life. And I sometimes find it strange that anybody, not saying you, but anybody would say, why should we migrate here for a better economic life? I say, why not? And I think the question about squeezing people out is a separate issue about zero contracts, low pay. That's the question, not the people migrating here.
And I would back that up fully. The thing about migration is, it's one of those areas where when you have the economy right and when you have society right, nobody notices it. And when you have a low pay economy in which employers are not trying to improve their innovation, improve their productivity, improve their exports, but reduce their costs, then you notice it. then you notice it because they are looking around to find the cheapest labour that they can from anywhere. But there's so much I'd love to answer. So for example, one of the things that we're terrible about in this economy, and we stuff the book about, one of the things we're very bad at about Britain is making it possible for seasonal work. So one of the reasons why we bring in lots of Eastern European people is there's things like the fruit picking season. And they come for 3 months and they do that and then they leave. But see, in this country, to leave a job and go to another job for 3 months and then come back is you're penalised. And so things like seasonal work, which we've got young people who would be very happy to get, but are not badly paid jobs often, those ones. But we don't have an economy which enables them to do it. And in the end, if you look at where a lot of those people came into, they came into construction, and again, a lot of that construction was not brilliant quality, knock them up fast, sell them on quick, and they were bringing in unskilled people in. And in the hospitality industry, so we've still got a hospitality industry which has got incredibly low margins for most people. And that's not, I mean, there's all sorts of reasons for that. Among them is our terrible transport links. I mean, tourism in Scotland is difficult because half of Scotland, if you don't have a car, you can't get there. And if you do have a car, the cost of getting there is expensive. So we've got very little domestic tourism. And that means that there's low margins in the tourism sector and they pull lots of people in. So immigration is not in itself a good thing or a bad, well, no, actually it is. It is a good thing, simply because it's cosmopolitan. You know, anyway, don't criticise immigration if you're eating chips. The Italians that brought it. Or if you're having a curry, because it was the Indians that brought that. An ice cream, because they brought that too. Or a Chinese, because that wasn't us either. So immigration is good, but economically, immigration is neither good nor bad. Immigration just shows you whether you've got a good or a bad economy. And that's the thing that makes me really sick about the Farage stuff, which is, it wasn't the immigrants that tanked the economy, it wasn't the poor, it wasn't the disabled, it was the bankers. And I often note with some wry amusement how quickly it is after the elite screw up, how quickly it is they start pointing the fingers at immigrants and the poor and the disabled. So
I think both issues you talk about, strong economy and immigration, is, as Christine and Robin were saying, they are closely linked. I mean, I can speak from personal experience. When I finished university, I did okay, but I was working at the time in a minimum wage job, and I couldn't find another job, so I went to work abroad for a year. I came back, I still couldn't find a job, so I went back, worked abroad for a couple of years, and it took me, when I came back home, I wanted to stay in Scotland, it took me another year or a year and a half before I actually found a job that was more than a minimum wage thing, and that's a huge issue. And I think you're looking, it's not just an immigration issue, you have to look at the wider economy, you have to look at education systems as well, because right now I think we have an education system where the apex is universities, when I think there are certain areas, and universities are overflowing, but there are areas that don't require a university degree to stimulate the economy. I mean, you're getting degrees from, and no disrespect to anyone who's a hairdresser, but you don't need a degree to cut hair. You can do it by apprenticeships, and you can start to invest in that way. And it's about how we stimulate our economy and how we grow that before you start looking at immigration. There's, as Robin saying, the fruit pickers and that, there's certain areas that it's difficult to work for Scottish young people, unless they're on summer holidays and go berry picking, which I used to do. But it's difficult to do that if you have a job and then move away for 3 months to do something else. What I think we need to do is we need to start focusing on how we go about re-stimulating the economy. So the example I would use is using oil, which is a finite resource. That we know it's not going to be 5 years, as Danny Alexander would say, before it runs out, but it's not going to be limitless. Using that and investing in that to build new social housing, which creates jobs in construction, well-paid jobs, to invest in our renewable energies, of which we've got 1/4 of Western Europe's potential, to invest in manufacturing industry, to build apprenticeships, build new jobs, so when people leave school, it's not minimum wage in a retail sector, or go to college or go to university and then walk away with whether or not we have tuition fees, a mountain of debt for most people on student loans. And we have to look at ways of creating that, and I think immigration, as Robin's saying, it's only noticeable when there's a bad economy. So with a strong economy, you wouldn't notice immigration.
I think it's time to put their hand up for a further question. The gentleman down here, please.
About the prospect of independence, that we can do well drive social policies, but it won't be by blaming other people. It's going to be tough. I don't think we'll necessarily be better off. I don't think we'll necessarily have the kind of will immediately or very soon that you want to see. You're not on the red Clyde here, you're on the blue tweed. We vote for Conservatives and Liberals as well as Christian.
Thank you.
And you need to understand that when you come to Walkerburn to speak. So it's a complex issue. There's so much that Scotland's doing great, and I'm just so proud to be here and to be part of it. But I don't like blaming the big boy down the road.
Can I answer that? Absolutely right. One of the things that you say, I'm absolutely agreeing. What has happened, and I'm Googling Westminster, I'm Googling Westminster, I'll tell you why in a second, but it's a kind of politics. It's a kind of politics. And Westminster, for a long time now, has run a deliberately divisive politics. You're on one side or you're the other. You're red or you're blue, you're older, you're young, you're from here or you're not from here. Now, we use the term all of us first for a very specific reason. Because one of the things which has greatly annoyed me is the thing which has made life bad for most working people is the same thing that's made life bad for most pensioners. And it's the same thing that's made life bad for most small businesses. And it's the same thing that's made life bad for most rural or smaller town communities. And what we've said with all of this is, enough now. Stop blaming people. Now, I know that sounds odd because I didn't blame Westminster, but stop blaming people for solutions. So if you listen to what I said was the cause of our problems then, but our solutions are about stopping blaming people. Stopping blaming, it's them. Now, I do not take away a word of criticism from Westminster. When I was a wee boy, 1 year old, in the run-up to the 1997 election, I was the press officer for the leader of the Scottish Labour Party. And I went down to Westminster. And I went down there as a 21-year-old, excited. I thought the place was going to be packed with young people like me that wanted to make the world a better place. Has anyone been to Westminster? It's not what it's like. It was filled with creeping little careerists who just wanted to get a future cabinet minister's name on their CV so they could go and get a job in the lobbying sector in the city. Westminster is a bad parliament. Democracy is like a dog. If you wanted to behave well, you've got to keep it where you can see it. The further you let it get away, the worse it behaves. The further you leave a dead zone. It's got a non-proportional electoral system. Sorry? The European Union, and that's a whole other question, but the European... Okay, but it's a longer answer. The European Union has major problems. My personal judgment at the moment is we're on a tipping point with the EU. The EU is anti-democratic. It definitely is, there's no question about that. The question is, does it do more good or more harm? And my general judgment at the moment is the social democratic part, which stops us having a race to the bottom in public services and in benefits and all that kind of stuff, is currently doing more good than the other bit, the economic stuff, which is encouraging a race to the bottom on wages and things. Now, that for me is a tipping point. It needs to be democratised. It's fundamentally wrong that it's a non-democratic system. But is it better to be in or not? I'm pragmatic. The reason I don't want to be in the Westminster system is it's undemocratic, or it's not a greatly democratic system, and it's misfunctioning. The EU is probably currently doing more good than bad. So I'm a pragmatist. I will look at each case on its own basis. Now, I believe, absolutely fundamentally believe, that the rest of Britain, particularly England, can change out of all recognition. But and I think Scotland could be a big part in that. They've been told for years there's no other way to do it. If we become independent and we do it a different way and we succeed, I think that will change everything in England. I really think it will. But I have conversations with my left friends from London a lot, and I was talking to one of them, and I said, here's the funny thing though, England's only chance is to escape from Westminster. Westminster's a London Parliament, and if you think that we've done worse out of the UK is probably the single most geographically unequal country in the developed world now. There was a period when the city of London, London City, its economy grew by 35%. And in that same period, the economy of South Wales grew by 3%. This is not a United Kingdom. It's a contemptuous kingdom to the bits which are outside the big metropolitan centres. London isn't a problem for Scotland. London's a problem for all of Britain. And my answer is, I think it's not a federal Britain we need a federal England. if there was a Parliament of Northumbria, and a Parliament of York, and a Parliament of Cornwall, as well as a Parliament of London, and they were all given power, and they had the power to hold London to account, like the Scottish Parliament has done, I think that would save England. London is a problem, just the same way that Washington's a problem, and we can't ignore the fact that it is a lobbyist-filled finance. I mean, do people know this one thing, and I'll stop? Do you know that there's a person who has a fundamental statutory right to sit behind the Speaker in the Westminster Parliament and stop him if business infringes the interests of the City of London? There's a character called the Remembrancer, and the Remembrancer is allowed to sit behind the Speaker, and his job is to remind the Speaker that Parliament should never interfere with the interests of the City of London. But people don't really know that. Have a look the next time you watch the Parliament. There's a guy that creeps about in the background. Should we have that in the Parliament? Is it democratic? We don't even know these things. Sorry, that was a terribly long answer.
It's not very often I get outspoken here, but first of all, I'm not a career politician. I was a teacher and a lawyer, and I'm an accidental politician. So that's the first thing, and quite a few of us are there, and we're not yet filled up with careers, though it might happen, which would be sad. I didn't want to give the impression I was blaming Westminster. It's a fact. It's a fact that power devolved is power retained. And if we are dependent on a block grant, then we are a dependent parliament and not independent. The fact that we can't deal with the major, the macro issues of war and weapons and the macroeconomy, and we can't deal with any of that. So it's just a statement of fact. It's a statement of fact that when we increase income through income tax and national insurance by things we do in the Scottish Parliament, those revenues go to London. But I would also agree here with Robert is that, to me, I was asked, as I was doing interviews about, would this disadvantage the north of England? I think the liberation of Scotland by independence will do the same to the regions of England, because the people of the north of England suffer very much like Scotland. The difference is, for me, we are a nation. We already have in place the established parliament, and we have our churches, we have our education system, we have our justice system, policing. We have all this in place. And I would like to see what would happen on independence is that the north of England, which in fact you recall rejected having an assembly with some kind of power, will do that, because much of the policy that's coming is from the overheated London economy. The inflation in house prices, I mentioned the bedroom tax, none of that's relevant to the north of England, or indeed Wales or Northern Ireland. I think too, you just need to listen to BBC News, you see it's London-centric. One day I want the weather forecast to start up in Shetland, and not what's happening in the south of England. That's a light point, but it's a way of looking at things. So it's not a blame culture, it is a case of fact. And until we take this, and you said we might be worse off, we might. But that's to do with who we vote for, the policies that we have, its responsibility.
It's like being grown up though, isn't it? It's not about promising you'll be better off if you do this.
I have I do not go for the argument you'll be £1,000 better off or you'll be £1,500 worse off. Nobody could have predicted the collapse in the bank 7 years. Everybody says you can't predict, 2 years' time. They never predicted that. What I can see is the opportunity to make a better job of running your country and being more just is open there. And in terms of having democratic representation, remember the Scottish Parliament's under proportional representation. We have 18 Conservatives. They have a right to be there. They represent the proportion of the vote they got. The Liberals now only have 5 because they represent the vote they got. But they're there. We have 2 Greens, we have independents. That's the importance about this. We already have in motion 15 years of practice in having proportional representation. We took over the domestic economy and the buses still run, the houses are there, the schools are still there, things that we're capable of running our affairs.
I was told it wasn't really to do with independence, but I think I take a bit of issue with that. There are two things. One, you're talking about the lack of confidence in Scotland. I think that is very apparent, and amongst young people in particular, unfortunately. It maybe sounds like, you know, it's not an issue to be discussing here, but I think, you know, ordinary people, we're going to be depending on them for the vote. There's a lot of them out there and they're not here. Politics, for me, is a bit confusing, and I probably understand it a wee bit better even than they might, you know. I was a social worker with children and families, so I know all the things you're talking about, it's true. But it does concern me as to how we're going to reach these ordinary people. I once read somewhere, and you know, it's just something, a comment that I've made, that if there's a lot of litter in a country, and let's face it, Scotland is full of litter, it not only shows a lack of pride in your country, it shows a lack of pride in yourself. So that's one issue that I think we really need to be looking at. How can we help our young people gain more pride in themselves as a person, to be more sure of themselves to speak out like I'm doing now? How many of them would be able to do that? We need to look at the education of them to help them to do that. So that's
I'd address the key point about confidence, and then also
I think there is an issue, and it's, you know, it's the Scottish cringe factor that we're so negative about everything. I mean, I'm sure you've seen it if you get a sunny day. You know, it's like that. It's not going to last long. It's going to rain later on, and that's the negativity we have, and it sort of seeps the entire nation through sport, through culture, and really the way forward in regards to creating a Scotland that takes more pride in itself, and you mentioned pride in itself and as individuals, is through education, and it's about telling people about Scotland and the fantastic achievements that we've done, because, you know, I'm actually just finished my primary teaching course. I'm about to start teaching next year, and one of the things that when I was at school we never did, we never really looked at Scottish literature, we never looked at Scottish history, we never really looked at art from Scotsmen, Scots people. And one of the things I think they're trying to do now with the Curriculum for Excellence is to try and educate people and children in Scotland about where their position is in the world and how it relates on an international level as well. I think there's much more that we could be doing. But I think independence does play an important part in this, because you have to be, I think it's, when you get called a region, and when you get called, you know, you're not a nation, then that is going to have an impact on you. When your tennis player is Scottish when he gets beat, but British when he wins Wimbledon, then that's going to have an effect on you. And it's a consistent thing, and it's a media thing, it's a cultural thing, and it's also a generational thing. And I think independence is an important starting point to that, to say, you know what, we're not perfect, and we accept that we're not perfect. But we do have some fantastic things. We've got a great history, we have great culture, we are known throughout the world. We are just as good as anyone else. We need to be, you know, and I think Germany is an excellent example. I remember watching this, and it probably was a version on child cruelty, to be honest. There was a child trying to learn how to dive into a swimming pool, and he could not get it. And I was sitting there watching him, and he must have went 50 times before he finally got it right, and his dad kept making him do it and do it again. And sometimes his dad didn't have to make him, because he would do it himself, because there was that drive for perfection. There was that drive to be the best that he could be, and if he didn't get it, he was going to do it right. In Scotland, we would kind of be like, oh, try it. Let's go to the pub. And that's the attitude we need to have, and I think that's a national attitude, and that comes from having your own identity and having your own nation.
And can I add one thing onto that? I wouldn't underestimate the confidence of our young people across the board. I've done talks in Boroughmuir High School, which is a very, you know, it was a debate, a very middle class. They weren't lacking in confidence. And I've done them in Clydebank, and they were lacking in confidence. You know, the big thing which changes your confidence is whether you've ever won. If you've won, then you believe you can win in the future. And if you've only experienced failure and loss, then you don't believe that you'll achieve failure and loss. Far too many children in our society, by the time they're 18, they've never experienced a win, a victory, a good. They've only experienced loss and failure and defeat. And that's to do with inequality and social choice. way to get confidence up in people is let them get the occasional win. And if we could spread the wins across our society better, we'd see leaps and jumps. On the productivity, this is a very important question. It's really at the heart of everything that we want to do here. So the first thing to say is that we've got to look and see, if everyone else can do it, why can't we? If everyone else everyone else in Europe has created a higher pay economy of the advanced nations, have created a higher pay economy than us, why can't we? What is it that fundamentally means that we can't do it? Now, the first thing to say is, if you have pay rises on the same economy you've got and you don't improve the economy, it just creates inflation. Drop in profits, it's a failure. You've got to create increases in wages through increases in productivity.
Then nobody's going to buy it.
No, this is my exact point. We're the only country who has seen a drop-off in our manufacturing and export. Everyone else improved. This is exactly the point. Now, let me give you an example of how it is that we think that high wage isn't possible and other people do. If you go to a supermarket or a big clothes retailer in Sweden, each of the people there are not 0 hours minimum wage clipboard people just hanging things up. What they do is they divide the shop up into different sections, and each person manages that section, manages the stock, manages customer. They become skilled jobs. And those skilled jobs create better pay, and it makes them more productive and more efficient. Their retail is more productive than our retail, because their people are better than our people. And now this does put prices up, but it puts wages up first. And that's the crucial thing. The wages go up, and this takes the prices up. But the deal is way better, way better. And so, for example, you look, the average salary in Scotland is £25,000. The average salary in Norway is £45,000, and their export record is miles better than ours. Miles better than ours. Now, on a specific case, and how we get there is slightly different. What we are saying on the living wage immediately is there are an enormous number of companies in this country who are not paying a living wage and who can. And we subsidise the difference with tax credits. Now, we did a model of this. If you were to say to all the low-pay employers, you're going to pay a living wage, immediately it would save £250 million on tax credits. Now, we have to recognise this in the book. We have to recognise that not every business will immediately be able to pay a living wage. The smaller businesses and the independent businesses don't have the margins and the profits of Tesco. And so what we can do is we take that £250 million and we help the employers who can't yet pay a living wage to pay a living wage. But we do that in parallel with a process of saying we have to have better businesses, productivity improvement, expanding new markets, greater innovation. We have a terrible track record of innovation. And so this idea that because there's one thing that's like this now and we can't see how it would change, we just assume it can, is the British problem. If you look at the other countries, what they see is, here's this business and it's not able to pay a living wage. What is it about its trading environment, its work, its content? What is it that's making it not as productive as it should be? And how do we change that? That's the one thing that Britain doesn't do. Britain just says we will sit back and just see what happens. And they don't give industry support. We've got to give industry support to help small independent businesses locally expand markets, increase productivity, improve innovation, and increase wages. Everybody else can do it. Among the advanced economies, everyone else can. We can too. There's lots and lots of detail about this in the book.
But there's like the little local post office there, the shop's full. Do you know what I mean? They've got like 5 staff. How can they make more money to pay more wages because it's a small shop?
But again, this is what happens. When you get this process over time, it doesn't happen overnight. We move towards it. The first thing that you do is you diversify the economy. That's the #1 way that you do this. So what you don't say is you say, we take the economy that we've got and everyone gets paid more. What you say is, we've got to rebalance this economy. We need to create more high-paid jobs. So you replace low-paid jobs with high-skill, high-paid jobs. If that's how you do it across the economy. Then you come to places, like I say, retail, it doesn't really become a lot more productive or a lot more profitable. You've got to accept that they work in an environment, in an economy which is improving. More people can buy from them because more people have got wages in their pockets. More people are able to buy more, and so they get more profits from this. And this is the point. As people, we've got this deal, low wage, low prices. And it's terrible for us because it closes down all our domestic manufacture. High wages and better prices is good for us. That's what has made people wealthy. Low prices are not good for us. So what you have is more people with more wealth able to do more in the economy, and it's a virtuous circle. As money's in people's pockets, every bit of the economy has got more money sloshing around it, and it grows. That's how you do it.
Okay, great question. Thank you, Kenneth.
These are silly things. Coming back to your Jimmy Reid man, there are a lot of jobs. There are a lot of people in this country. There are a lot of jobs in this country, but the people aren't prepared to do the jobs or aren't up to doing it. Isn't that really where you start preparing people for work and getting that right? The jobs are there. And don't think that this country, manufacturing industry, doesn't run itself properly. This was started to be addressed by Peter Drucker and people back in the 70s. We follow a lot of the principles that Sweden and Japan and these places do. We're not just treating workers like dirt. You try to compare us with Norway. Yes, they earn 45,000, but it costs them 50,000 to live there. You've got to compare life with life. No, I'm exaggerating.
You're badly exaggerating. Have to accuse me of using statistics.
With theories and that. Practical reality is not the same as that, you know. Have you run a business? Do you understand what it's like trying to...
And have you got through a week in benefits?
Yes, I have.
On benefits?
Yes, I have.
Okay, you have an experience of
I've had to go and sell newspapers on the street and then start again.
Sure.
Start from the top,
now,
right down to the bottom. I understand
what I'm been trying to talk about all day today is a very carefully and very detailed set of papers which are filled with detailed references, case studies, comparators, international statistical comparators, and the works. Everything I've told you here is for real, is genuine. All of that detail is there, and all of that evidence is there. We are a low-pay economy. We do have a very low productivity rate. Everybody accepts that. We do have very poor exports, terrible exports when you take oil out of the picture. All of the things that I've been talking about here, the volume of the economy, which is retail compared to the volume that's manufacturing, all of that is true. Now, and incidentally, the suggestion that there are lots of jobs out there, if only people had the skills, is measurably not true. If you, again, the numbers that I tell you here...
So you do know our statistics then? Because statistics show that is true.
1 in 3 jobs in this economy do not pay £14,000 a year. Now, that's a straightforward factual statement. The poorest 10% of workers in Norway, the average wage of the poorest 10% is 25,000. Our average is 6,000. So these are real. These are not make-up. This is people's day-to-day life. And what I say to everybody is, I appreciate not everybody necessarily accepts the analysis that we've got. We followed a different analysis, the one that you talked about, whereby you assume that a demand side, if we just train them more, it'll solve itself. It didn't. We've been doing it for 35 years. And so what we've tried to do gradually and gently here is to go through the real situation, the real statistical outcome, and all the implications of it, to measure us against the best global comparators and to see what are they doing that we're not. And if you think Britain is comparing well to most manufacturing advanced nations, then I'm sorry, we're not looking at the same numbers you and me.
We're not entirely a manufacturing country.
We're not a manufacturing country.
We spread our wings much wider than that.
Where do we spread our wings? Where?
In finance.
Finance? You're suggesting that we need more banking?
Brings wealth to the country.
Does it? Is that where we are? Did the financial sector bring wealth to the country? Did it tank the economy?
So, sir, can I ask you, I'll give you an opportunity to ask one more question.
Something that nobody has addressed here. I went with a group of parliamentarians to Taiwan, and Taiwan does not a lot of manufacturing now. It used to be a joke, made in Taiwan. They, in fact, invest in research and development. They value their high-grade students, PhDs, doctorates, and they do a great deal of research, seed corn research, and when it's successful, and it's not always successful, they keep the license and license it out and make money that way. Now, when I look at Scotland and I look at our academic sphere and our research and development, we don't value them. We don't value them either as academics, and we don't value them when we've got companies that can afford to sponsor it. And there's an area where, I hope you agree with me, where the high level where we can't produce, manufacture, where there are economies, regrettably, but abroad, that can manufacture things dirt cheap, where we can't compete with them, we don't pay attention to where we could be earning money for the economy in research and development and academics. You'll get academics that are around to be a darn sight less than 25,000 a year who could be producing stuff. The research could be then licensed out and bring money back into the Scottish economy. That's not happening.
I very much agree with that, but I don't think that Scotland independence is going to be able to do more than the UK as a whole to address that.
So I would have to say to you, you need to look at both sides of the debate, because I know that it's been said research and development in Scotland will fall by the wayside, but there's many academics who disagree entirely with that view.
Thank you. Good debate. The young man at the back.
Will the NHS, what will be the plans for the NHS to become independent?
Excellent question.
Well, it already is. What's your name?
Walter.
Walter, it already is. And the thing about the NHS in Scotland is it's still in public hands. In England, regrettably, they're privatising, put to private companies a lot. In Scotland, we've kept it in public hands. And you heard me saying at the beginning, if you're in Walter, we don't charge people for prescriptions. You do in England. So our NHS, which we've looked after for 15 years, is top of our priorities. So it's already run by you, through us.
I think just to talk about the NHS, there are, we have a fantastic system within Scotland and the UK, which is unfortunately leading to some privatisation in the rest of the UK, a lot of it going to Virgin Healthcare. But it's not perfect. Let's be honest, it's not perfect. I'm sure as many good times as you've been, you might have a complaint about the NHS as well. Now, what my party is saying is it's offering a means testing. Basically, if you can afford it, then you don't get a free NHS. And we do that to save money to be able to invest in more, so that waiting times for that you get more than 15 minutes for care. I completely disagree with that, because it goes against entirely what my party was founded on, which was universalism.
That's right.
It goes against entirely the reasons why a member of my party, Bevan, created the National Health Service free at the point of service for everyone. Now, we have a real opportunity to protect that in Scotland, and we have an opportunity to improve it. But unfortunately, as we spoke about tonight, because we receive a block grant, it means that we can only do so much with the money that we've got. And if we want to improve one area, it has to come out somewhere else. If we have independence, we need to look at saying, what do we need? What is the best healthcare system we can legitimately afford to have? How do we go about finding the money to do that? And that goes back to, again, creating a strong economy. And that goes back to being able to invest in areas like manufacturing and moving away from a financial, as you mentioned, sir, and a retail economy, which basically we're based on now. So everything, unfortunately, does tend to go back and is interlinked to the economy. But because of this block grant, and we're probably going to see, with the way that the Barnett formula works, is the amount of money spent on public services in England and Wales is reflected. We get a percentage of that to be spent in Scotland. Now, because they're privatising certain areas of the public services, we will then get less money to spend in ours. And so the only way to even maintain the standards that we've got and to continue to find ways to improve it, and that includes, like my party said, and I agree with them, that 15 minutes care time is shocking. But we need to find ways in which we can improve on that and increase our spending in the National Health Service, rather than saying, well, I'd rather have this than that. It shouldn't be quid pro quo. It's the National Health Service, and that and education should be the benchmarks of our society. Free education and free healthcare.
A further point about the budget, which, I don't think everybody realises, and I certainly didn't realise before I went into Parliament. If you look at your health budget, and your justice budget, and your education budget, and so on, 85% of each of those budgets is fixed. You can't move it about. You can't take, you've not got 100% of the health budget to play with. unless you're going to close hospitals, stop having GPs, stop paying for ambulances, because these are all things that budget pays for, so they're sort of fixed. So that the bit that you have to move around with each of those budgets is only about 15%. It's a tiny, tiny bit. It's the same for the justice budget, because already it's paying for the police stations, the courtrooms, etc. Oh, I know. Jinx. So that again, it's only a tiny bit. So when you're thinking about why don't you move money from this one to that one, it's only that wee bit at the top that you can move around. It isn't the whole budget.
Okay, great, thank you. We're going to take a gentleman at the back, and we'll take this chap here. We'll take those 2 questions, and then we'll bring it to the panel, and then afterwards we'll come into the front.
If I say something that I hope I won't get thrown out for, Tony Blair actually said one true thing. When he was trying to rubbish the possibility of the Scottish Parliament, he made a statement that it was going to be little better than a parish council. And there was one thing about that was true, and that was the fact that it depends upon this block grant. And there is absolutely no question, unless we get a Parliament that has the full resources of our nation on hand in independence, then as that grant is cut back and attenuated, a Scottish Parliament will eventually be forced down the road of commercialisation and the break-up of the National Health Service. Though they will not want to do it, it will be financially forced on them. Okay. And the second point I wanted to make was there's been quite rightly a great deal of talk about the need for us to feel self-confident. I'm a retired academic historian, and I know perfectly well in education the most precious thing I could ever give my students was a belief in themselves. Now, by exercising our vote in September, we can provide that belief in ourselves. But in order to do so, we've got to realise some of the strengths that we have. And in the understandable interest tonight in talking about the things that are wrong with the UK, perhaps not quite enough has been said about the strengths that we have. Let me take just one example, and that is the extra that we have in our economy in the shape of gas and oil. Because without gas and oil, Scotland's GDP per head is as good as the rest of the UK. It's our bonus, our extra. And people try to talk it down in terms of the length of time that it has to run. Don't listen to them. There's 40 to 50 years in the North Sea, plus what is to come in the fields that have not been explored as yet in the Atlantic, plus the whole of the West Coast, which at the moment we cannot develop because of Trident. And in addition, don't listen to the stories about declining oil prices. The great difference, no matter what the oil price is, if the country voted no in September, the oil price would apply to the UK. It applies to Scotland. And the big difference is that if we are independent, oil and gas are 11 times more valuable to everyone in Scotland than if we remain a part of the UK. Okay. It's 93% divided by 5.3 million people instead of 100% divided by 63.1. That's 11,000%.
Okay. What will be worse, for want of a better word? What is Scotland going to lose when it becomes independent? Because everything can't be better. Nothing. Loads of sentiment tonight, but absolutely zero substance. What is Scotland going to lose? I can't imagine the answer is nothing. So
well, first of all, you say loads and loads of economy or income tax or benefits. That's not sentiment. These are hard facts. And it's hard facts that if we reject independence and we then have to wait for a general election in the UK, you're going to have so many cuts you won't know what's hit you. That's fact, and go and check it out. Don't just take my word for it. I wouldn't want that. But you know, you're saying these things about how I don't know if everything would be better. I'm not saying milk and honey, land of milk and honey. What I'm saying to you is this. You get the government you vote for collectively in Scotland. That's the first test of Scottish independence. What kind of independent government would they have? It won't be an SNP government necessarily. I told Nicola Sturgeon I don't know if I vote for her. I want to see what they've got in their manifestos. And then it's up to that Parliament to do its best with the resources, just the oil and gas, everything else that we have, the food, the drink, the manufacturing, to do its best with that. But I would hope, and this is where we're in the hands of the electorate, I would hope that electorate wouldn't say me first. I hope that electorate would say, I want to know that my neighbour will have access to a health service that I hope I never use. I hope that the children will get to university even though I don't have any. I don't have a granny, but I hope that that old lady and that old man have a decent, proper, respectful old age and are cared for. That's what I want. And that's what gives you the opportunity to do it. Whether we do it or not is up to the Scottish people. It's not up to politicians. It's up to the Scottish people.
I mean, I'm very, very careful with the stuff that I say. 1 in 5 people earn between £25,000 and £35,000. The average is 25. The median is the amount half earn less, half earn more, is 21, and the 30th percentile, a third, is 14. I know these numbers are exactly as I've said them a couple of times today. Now, if you think a living wage and a productive economy is a socialist utopia, I think you're setting your sights low.
Can I just interject here, Robin, and say that in your introductory speech, you dismissed retail as a significant industry in this country, and you also, I wrote it down as you spoke,
yep.
you rejected inward investment from multinational companies. How, if we do that sort of thing as a small independent country, are we going to pay for, my words, a socialist utopia?
Okay.
All these things that you talk about, you want to reject multinational investment.
Right, can you give me a second on answer? Right, I'm going to go this as quickly as I possibly can, because it's a very, very big question. The word investment is used willy-nilly. Sometimes the word investment is to invest, to put in time, effort or money in the hope of growing the whole to make the future better. Inward investment in this country is not inward investment, it's speculation. Now, this is a very big difference. If you put money in to capture an existing economy and take it and export it as sales, that's not investment. That's not investment. We would be buying those cornflakes, we'd be buying those clothes anyway. Now, this is one of the things that's been really shoddy about the UK. It uses the word investment. What it really means is capturing parts of the existing economy for yourself. In this country just now, if you take everything, and this is really important, if you take everything, all public investment, all private sector investment, and all personal investment, you add all of, so personal investment, paying for training, if you add all of that together, and then you subtract depreciation, the UK is a net, has negative investment rates. Negative investments. We need proper, give me 2 seconds, we need proper investment. Now, if you want proper investment, again, we can explain this very quickly, we need a National Investment Bank which is investing properly, not just capturing existing wealth and exporting it. If we take, if we could raise $5 billion in bond markets with no difficulty, put that into a National Investment Bank, and that would enable us to create an investment programme over 20 years of £100 billion, proper investment. Now, that's how you invest.
Excuse me, this is actually about independence. After independence, there's going to be a broad church view of things and so on, not one particular philosophy, okay? It's very fine, I like it, it would be ideal. However, it's not, say, after independence that will be realised in that way. Your 50 papers, your white papers and things like that are not necessarily the manifesto post-independence.
Sure, but
it's not the only way.
What do you imagine I was invited here to talk about? And I'm only answering the question. So I encourage you to get up and
to encourage people to vote yes.
And again,
not just some people, but all people.
But people ask me if I can explain why a case, why it can be better.
Robin, can I interject?
Okay, so
let me answer that question.
Hold on a second. Let's take this gentleman's question too, because I'm conscious of time. And then if we can try and combine the last
question there, you are going to lose, well, there is a chance that we will lose something. I've been firmly in the Yes campaign, and I still am. My fear, and the one that still has not been addressed yet, is currency.
Oh, that's a good one.
Okay.
That's the only word I'm going to say, it's currency.
So that's a good question. So can we ask the panel, before I say do, has anyone got any final? Nobody's going to rush off if you want to ask the question. Two ladies at the back.
Yes.
Can we pass the microphone back?
Can I just ask,
Yep.
it's all very well, you want to do more housing and get the, struggling businesses that can't pay the living wage, you're going to help them. Where's all the money coming from? Are taxes going to rise? Norway, I believe the taxes are very high there to pay for their economy.
Because they've got high pay.
Okay, thank you. That was a good question. We'll add that. The lady next.
Yeah, I'm not an expert on all this, but I've got 5 glasses. You said something about other countries' own things that I'm not quite
National Grid, I think it was.
Yeah, so do we have to buy that back from somebody to get that revenue back in Scotland so that people can... if there are things that have been sold off, do we have to buy them back, or can we just take them back, or
okay,
what kind of money is it?
Okay, that's a general principle question. If we want to take something back into public ownership, do we have to buy it back? Can I ask then each of the panel address what we're going to lose and address specifically the point about the pound, and then answer this question on ownership? And we'll start with Allan.
Right, I'd just actually very, very briefly just like to respond to this gentleman. You're absolutely right, but the reason that we are invited, and I think the gentleman there was talking about Labour visions and, the tweed blue as he described it. Of course, but we're coming at from our perspective, and Robin's doing the same. Much the same as the white paper is not a manifesto for independence, it's a manifesto for what the SNP will plan to do for independence. Independence, if you want to strip it all away to the most basic principle, is vote yes and you get to pick whichever party you like the manifesto of best to govern your entire country rather than part of it. I'd like to focus on the currency question. First of all, the currency set out by the SNP in having a currency union is what's known as... I'd like to sort of ask you first of all, could you give us what's your confusion about it? Or
the confusion is that we seem to have 2 of the panellists here that seem to want to have an independent Scotland. That's it, cut off. And they want to have everything under their own ownership in Scotland. If you want to do that, we can't have a currency union. We have to have our own pound, or euro, or dollar, whatever we want to use.
Right. Okay.
Perfect. It's only a question.
I completely agree. I actually believe we should have our own currency, but I think that we're looking at it in a longer term, because I think what's difficult in politics and sometimes is we don't look beyond 5 years, beyond the next election. And I think we have to realise that Scottish independence is a completely different ballgame, and that we're looking at what's going to happen in the next 20, 50, 100, 200 years. So in the initial term, what the Scottish Government has proposed is a currency union. Now, that's what a lot of economics professors have called an optimal currency in which it benefits both. And I think it's actually been quite generous to the rest of the United Kingdom as well, because there is going to be initially an increase in their trade deficit, which stands about, well, Grogan's actually better with figures, but I think it was about 4.6%, and we've got to about 9 to 12% deficit. So this would give them that would decrease this over the period of time. It was the same that happened when the European Union formed the euro. It went through 2 or 3 years of difficult periods, and then they bounced back. The United Kingdom bounced back and were able to readjust. That's, I think, the currency union would benefit both sides. It would benefit Scotland in the sense that, as an independent country, the market would see it as, the international markets would see it as perhaps more unstable. Now, by having a currency union in the initial interim term, I think is a reasonable thing, but I wouldn't say it was everlasting. What it does do is it doesn't close the door to everything else, so that in 5 or 10 years' time, when Scotland is an independent country and it's standing there on its own 2 feet, we can then look at what's best for Scotland. Now, if in 10 years' time the euro is bounced back and everything's fantastic, and we want to join that, then we can do that. If we want to put our own currency, have our own currency.
Have to have our own currency for 10 years?
Sorry?
Before we can get into the euro.
And we wouldn't have our own, it would be a joint currency union anyway, so it would be going straight from the pound to the...
And Allan, what would we lose?
Finally. Do you know what, this is one of these things. I was speaking to a primary teacher and he said that his class were going to write something and they had to write the good points and bad points of yes and no. And I said, I don't think I could do that. And because, and it's maybe looking at it from a blinker perspective, but I'm seeing what is happening in this country, and I'm seeing, you know, the deprivation in areas of this country, and the fact that we can do so much better. When you're looking at a country that has so much resources, so much human resources, it's very difficult when you look and walk past the high street and see nothing but closed down shops and charity shops, that you are going to see what's going to be bad for it.
Allan, you paint a very bleak picture of the United Kingdom. You really, really do. I don't live in the world that the panel have described tonight.
I do.
Hold on. Sorry. Let's go along the panel, okay?
Right, okay, quickly, what we lose. Of course, there's things that are not going to be the same. We will not have an offensive army. We would not have an army which was able to invade another developed country. We will not have an embassy network in every country, but we won't have that. There's a number, we will not have a seat at the G8.
Control over our currency.
No, that we can have. Again, that we can have. It's not certain. But see, nothing's certain. You think we get control over sterling. You think the money markets and us have more control over sterling. So, these are things that we definitely won't have. I don't think they're anything that we need. The big thing, which I'm straight about, is nothing is straightforward. There will be an 18-month period when we go from where we are now to where we're going to be, which will have turbulence. There's no question about that. Borrowing rates will rise for probably 6 months, a year, 18 months. Not much, but a bit. So we'll have a turbulent period when things are resettling down. Once we're through that, there is nothing that Britain has, apart from the couple of things that I've mentioned, which we cannot replicate comfortably if we want to. So, put it another way, what does Denmark not have, which Britain has, that they would want to have? We can replicate these things fine, and I'm sorry, I understand that your experience of Britain isn't one of poverty, but it is of a lot of people. So that's that. Currency, it's the most difficult question. There's no question about it. I spent a lot of time thinking about it, and I do not have a firm answer. I'll give you the very, very, very quick pros and cons. Sterling union is very, very dangerous. The likelihood of the UK, it's not about control, the likelihood of the UK escaping another financial crisis are slim. All of the debt failures in the City of London are still where they were during the last one. All we did was we bailed out the City of London. It didn't reform itself. If there is another global economic shock, this time the city is going to go over and we will not have the resource to bail them out. So a sterling union is the one that I think is the most risky. Sterlingisation, that's using sterling without a formal pact. You could only do that for a certain period of time, 5 or 10 years. It's not a suitable permanent, but it's a good transitionary option. The two options for me that I think are probably good. One is the euro. Now, people are down in the euro crisis. Well, we've been through this euro crisis, and what's happened to the relative values of the euro and sterling? If the euro's in crisis, it's collapsed, right? No, the euro's been rising. Now, for Greece, the euro's a catastrophe, because Greece is a country which doesn't export a lot. It's not trying to export a lot, and so the currency is high for it. But for Germany, which is trying to export, the currency is artificially low. Scotland, 5 years into independence, would be a heavy exporting nation because of the volume of oil, never mind anything else. Actually, the euro could be good for us. It would keep the value of our currency artificially low and would make us extra competitive in exports. So that's a possibility. And the other is one-for-one pegged sterling. Now, the downside of that, of creating sterling, Scottish pound pegged one-to-one with the UK pound. The downside of that is it's more expensive to set up, but the upside of that is it should not cost us anything, because the UK forces us to go through the cost of setting up a new currency, because it's remove our right to use our existing currency. I would very strongly argue that this cost of setting up the new currency should be subtracted from any debt that we absorb. So my view is, personally, I'm tending towards move straight to a Scottish currency or sterlingisation, wait 5 years to judge where the euro and where a Scottish currency would be.
And Robin, can I ask you to ask the ladies?
The money at the back. I actually said in the way through, we can't raise income tax to fix those finance problems for the reason I was explaining. 50% of everybody in work doesn't earn enough money to be a net contributor to the tax system, for the reasons that I explained earlier on. We can't just put, at the moment, we can't just put income tax up. The only way that we do have to put some taxes up. We need to end corporation tax evasion. We should have the 50 pence tax level put back in. I think we should think about a 60 pence tax ban for people who earn 150,000 and over. I favour a tax on whisky, which not the bottle of production, because those whisky companies are extremely profitable in this country. So we've got to suggest a small basket of taxes which are about targeting unproductive wealth that we can do, but mostly it's about creating economic change so that people have money in their pocket and they are paying tax. And this is what I say again, economic reform can raise billions of pounds in tax just by itself.
And Robin,
that's what we have to do.
Could you ask another one though about ownership, and then I'm going to ask Christine to
This is the question. Also, it depends what you're buying. The national grid we've largely paid for already. Remember that the full cost of the national grid is passed on to the customer through the United Nations have got a rule about taking things back into collective ownership. You have to pay reasonable compensation. I would strongly argue that since the customer base in the country have already paid for the national grid through charges on their bills, that we should have a very low or zero cost. That's the national grid. That would not apply if somebody wanted to nationalise a bank. That's different. You've got to start paying the market rate for it. But in the case of the national grids, it shouldn't be expensive to take it back into collective control because we've already paid for it.
Can I say, when you're considering to vote yes or no to independence, I hope it isn't whether or not we're going to have ownership of the national grid. It's not seeing the wood for the trees. The big picture is what you should be looking at is, would you have the opportunity to make any of the choices? Now we've got different political views, with quite a lot in common, but different political views. So that's the thing you have to focus on. I hear very serious questions about, how could the company afford to pay more in wages? How can this? How can that? These remain as questions, but the difference with independence is we can do something to change that. It won't change unless we become independent. These questions, these things about us not owning things, about low pay, about zero wages, about cuts, that will just continue. So these things will all have to be met by that independent parliament and the manifestos, whether it's to renationalise the grid or whatever. That all follows. The important thing is to get the independence first. And on the question of sterling, I'm very simple about politics. I say to myself, why was it, because sterling's UK, it doesn't belong to England or Wales, nothing. Why did they say you're not going to have a currency union with us? What effect did that have on people who were thinking of voting yes? It was to put them into Project Fear. It's the only reason it was said. It was, will this stop people voting yes? Would it make them vote no? That's the test of everything that's being thrown in the direction to stop people voting yes. They're not building our confidence, they want to knock it down. It is, of course, bleedingly obvious that it's in the interest, at least in transition over a period of years, for England, Scotland, Wales and Northern Ireland to have the same money. It's in the interest of people not far away in Berwickshire to have the same currency as us, as it is for them. So it's like the poker player sitting with a cards here, saying, actually, I've not got a very good hand here, says the London government, but I'm not letting on. I'm going to pretend I've got a really good hand here. But once the card of independence is played, the hand's exposed. And there will be none of this nonsense about currency. All of that will disappear. So all I would ask you to do, when these things are being said to you, is to say, why is that being said? And it's usually being said to scare the pants off you, so that you don't have confidence to vote yes. And the other question I'm asking you to look at is to say, if I don't vote yes, are things really going to change for me and my children and my grandchildren and the folk next door Is it all going to keep going like this? And I have to say to you, yes, it will keep going like this, and that's not good.
Okay, I'm conscious of time, folks, so we will wrap up there just with a couple of little reminders. We do have the Wealthy Nation event on in the McFarlane Hall on the evening of the 27th of June. There is several of these forms over on the table. If anyone would like us to contact you because you want more information or still have questions, or maybe you run a local group and you would like someone to come along and do a talk, our local group is happy to support that. If you feel inclined, there is a donations bucket. We're not looking for a lot of money. All we want to do is a couple of quid to pay for the hall and leaflets, etc. Otherwise, I would just ask you, ladies and gentlemen, for a round of applause to thank our panel.